The Shining. I'm going to do a deep dive into everything that makes this film so terrifying, and stick with me till the end, and I'll tell you about my own recent horrific experience with this movie.
Here's Johnny!
Let's start with the cinematography. Stanley Kubrick chose to shoot with an 18mm wide camera angle lens. This allows for captivating scenes, like in the intro when we watch the car driving down the road. You can see the vast landscape behind it. And in many of the shots in the movie during the Overlook Hotel, we see a character who's walking through a room, but yet this character seems so tiny in this giant room with open space. Which brings us to the very first fear, which is isolation. Isolation, the fear of being alone, something that people are afraid of all the time. It's that thing of what can go wrong when nobody's around. How does our mind handle being alone? Can it drive you mad? Does it make you feel comforting? For most people, it does not. Which leads me into my second point that is terrifying when it comes to The Shining. Isolation. It's one of those things, it leads to the main character, Jack Torrance. We see him in the beginning of the film, and he's happy. He's glad to be the caretaker, and even when he talks with his wife, he says he wouldn't rather be any other place. But as the time goes on, and we move further and further into the movie with more and more isolation, he starts to dive deeper and deeper into madness. This brings on one of Jack Torrance's terrifying fears he brings to this movie. The first one he brings is child abuse. In the beginning of the movie, we hear a story where he was drunk and he got a little too violent with Danny pulling on his arm, and he broke his arm. Child abuse is a very, very touchy subject for a lot of people because there are people who have lived it. It's one of those things that we just, as humans, we don't fully understand when we hear it, because how can somebody harm an innocent child who can't protect themselves? But that's what makes this so terrifying, is because it's so real. It's one of those things that we know happens every single day. And seeing it happen on camera, or even just hearing about it, just puts thoughts in our minds of stuff that we really, really don't want to see. The second Jack Torrance fear that's brought into this movie is his insane maniac behavior that he winds up going into. As he dives deeper and deeper into madness, he ends up getting more and more violent. And this brings on the fear of not being able to trust the ones that we love. Jack ends up going after his wife and his son with an axe. This is supposed to be somebody that they can trust and that they love, and they would never expect to do harm to you. This is also another one of those fears that plays on the reality of real life, where we see so many cases of where somebody was murdered or beaten by somebody who is supposed to love them. On to the Overlook Hotel. This giant, giant hotel that has a hedge maze outside of it that's almost just as big as the building. Way back in Colorado, you can't see anything for miles, and it's so isolated that the road that it's on doesn't even get plowed during the winter time. This hotel, when we first see it, it's brightly lit, and it's beautiful, and everything about it is just so amazing and captivating. But as the movie goes on, the film gets a little bit darker. The lighting in the hotel gets a little bit darker. Even when they show scenes where somebody's on the phone with another person, where that other person is, it's more lit. And in the hotel, it's darker. This is almost kind of setting up as if this hotel is in its own world. And when you're there, you're in the world of the hotel, not the world that you once knew. Which leads us on to the inhabitants of the Overlook Hotel. All of the ghosts. See, in traditional movies, the ghosts are sometimes the most horrifying people in the entire film. And in this movie, the ghosts are there for scares, to an extent. See, the ghosts can be seen just randomly here, randomly there, by both Jack and Danny, for the most part. And then the mother ends up going out of her way, and she sees a couple of ghosts as well. The unique part about the ghosts in this movie is that they all don't really seem to have a purpose. Are they there to do harm? Are they there to guide Danny to go on to the right path and get out of harm? Are they there just to scare them? Are they part of the reason why Jack is starting to go insane? The best part about this is we never truly get an answer. We don't know why these ghosts do what they do. But when we see them, they come out of nowhere. Sometimes we see grisly images to go along with them. Sometimes they're there just having a party and having fun. And Stanley Kubrick did a great job with this, because when you see them, you know you're supposed to be scared, but they're not really trying to scare you, giving you a sense of unknowing what's happening, which is another one of the terrifying themes of this movie, which is ambiguity. It's the fear of seeing something and not really knowing what it is, why it's there, or what it's going to do to you. Stanley Kubrick set this up perfectly with each and every one of the characters, because you get little tidbits, but you never get a true explanation. You don't know why they do what they do, but you're left intrigued. And thanks to the ambiguity, one of the biggest landmarks of this movie, in a sense, is the fact that he only shows you so much to make your mind wonder. And instead of giving you all the horrific details, he lets you create them all in your mind. If you like the video so far, give me a like down below, and maybe you can leave me in the comments what is some of the things that terrifies you about The Shining, or some of your most terrifying moments when watching it. On to the next category, which for me is the acting. I wouldn't be doing this movie justice if I didn't talk about how the acting helps amplify the terror that is in this film. See, Jack Nicholson, as we've seen in many movies, plays a great antagonist. He's the kind of guy that you want to see do good, but then you can also see why he would be the jerk. But he was a perfect casting for this role, because as we watch Jack Torrance go deeper and deeper and deeper into madness, Nicholson plays that perfectly. Fun little fact, he did eat a bunch of cheese sandwiches for 2 weeks leading up to this movie, because he absolutely hates cheese sandwiches. And he wanted to make sure he was pissed off for this role. The other main star of this movie that does not get the credit she deserves is Shelley Duvall. Sometimes people say she's animated and over the top, but Stanley Kubrick really likes to push his actors to the limit, doing take after take after take after take. Even so much so that The Shining holds the Guinness World Book of Records for most takes for a scene. The bat scene took 127 takes to film, and that last one is the one he put in the movie. And he purposefully does this to the actors so that he can get them as broken and beaten and mentally drained as possible for this role. And that's exactly what we see from Shelley Duvall. In these scenes, she's a woman who has just been psychologically tortured, and she's hit her breaking point, and she just emotionally can't control herself. And that's what makes her portrayal so terrifying, because it's literally exactly what you're seeing. You're seeing a woman who has been taken to the limit and pushed past it on camera. The last thing that makes The Shining so terrifying is the music, the score. In this movie, Stanley Kubrick does the opposite of what you would expect. In scenes where nothing is happening, the music ramps up, leading you to feel and think in your mind to go, oh crap. And then nothing happens. But then in scenes where something really does happen, there's no music. Or it's very subtle, like a heartbeat, or like a pin drop type sound. It's not amplifying the horror that's around you. And this is what leads to my own horrific story when it comes to The Shining. See, to be prepared for this video, I decided I was going to watch The Shining again. And, little backstory, I have sleep apnea. So therefore, I haven't dreamt in probably a good 25 years. But I got a mask recently, and that forces oxygen into me, and my brain can finally understand what's going on, and I can have dreams. So I put on The Shining when I was going to bed, and I fell asleep. And while I was asleep, I actually had my first dream in forever, and I had a nightmare. And the only thing I can connect to this nightmare is the fact that I actually heard the music from The Shining that was on my TV still playing in my dream. And to me, it's just so crazy that just by the sounds from this movie, the subconscious of my brain was like, yep, that's some scary ass shit. And it gave me all these grisly images that I saw, and just horrific. And for me, I haven't had a dream forever, so it was fantastic, because I wish I could always do that. But it's still crazy to me that the subconscious of my brain heard this and automatically said, yep, that's some terrifying shit. And that's what I saw in my dreams. The Shining came out in 1980, and it's still terrifying to this day. It's one of those movies that once the credits roll, your mind just keeps thinking about it. And that was purposefully done by Stanley Kubrick, which is what makes it terrifying, is he set out to make a movie that didn't just scare you, but it stuck with you. And the fact that everything is done in such an ambiguous way that you can't be told exactly what happens, but you get to create your own horrors, is why so many people can watch this movie and everybody gets something different from it. And that's one of the reasons why this movie is fantastic and heralded as one of the best horror movies ever made. If you like this content, subscribe to my channel, because you don't want to miss what video comes next. Until then, rest in peace.